Mailalagay po yan dyan sa screen natin. The bait and cry strategy indicates a coup, no? Of the U.S. proxies versus the foreign policy independent school in the Philippine policy community, in the Bongbong administration, ending the 2 months lull in the tensions with China. BBM collapsed again in the face of this pressure. Raymond Powell, can you find it? Makita, mamaya mailalagay po dyan. But so yung collision na naman po, we can put yan si Raymond Powell and call attention to this fellow. He's a very important character, Americano, ex-Air Force Colonel, na nasa likod nitong transparency strategy na sinusunod nila Tariela and company. Okay. So, nagsimula na naman ang kolisyon itong Marso. Collision slide number 1, please. So, the brain behind the transparency operations, ex-Colonel Raymond Powell, in his comments to the U.S. Naval Institute News, claps loudly and says, Manila has the right to expect a more muscular response from its partners and allies. Anong ibig sabihin po nitong sinasabi nitong si Raymond Powell? We'll elaborate. Calling for aggressive a more muscular response. Ibig sabihin niya, anong mas muscular kaysa sa water cannon? We'll explain further. Calling for aggressive NATO-like block response, insinuating the definition of armed attack to include water cannons. Nais niya isama sa armed attack na term na nandun sa Mutual Defense Treaty. And this is the next slide. As a result of these concerns, as well as incidents over the last week that saw damage to Philippine vessels, Powell told the USNI News that Washington and Manila needs to define what constitutes an attack, as well as how to properly respond to these escalating actions. The Philippines and the US are going to have to start having some very direct conversations about what constitutes an armed attack on a public vessel and make sure they communicate clearly to Beijing how close China is to triggering far more serious consequences. So, anong ibig sabihin niya dito sa sinabi niya? Yung water cannon gusto niyang i-redefine as an armed attack. Hindi na kailangan baril, water cannon lang. But that, of course, would go against international definition of non-lethal weapons. Okay. But importante na the public understands this. That is what the Americans want, to trigger the Mutual Defense Treaty. Okay, so Manila has, okay, the slide 2 nandun na, no? Colonel Raymond Powell had been pushing for escalation of his transparency strategy in the 2 months lull, Enero at Pebrero. Erstwhile PCG, Commander J. Tarela, who has apparently been pulled out of the task force by more professional personnel. After its last tactical shift to using civilians in Atinto noong Disyembre 2023, naalala po ninyo yung Atinto, magdi-deliver daw ng Christmas gifts doon sa Ayungin, BRP Sierra Madre, na wala namang nangyari, nag-collapse po yun, or handog Christmas gift distribution to BRP Sierra Madre failed miserably in December of 2023. Colonel Powell was in limbo for 2 months. They even tried ayuda swarming lately during Filipino fishermen with fuel and food to swarm Scarborough Shoal. Yung running priest yan, and then ang susunod na slide po, before, more Filipinos now ship fishing in Scarborough Shoal. Dahil nga binigyan nila ng gasolina at pagkain para mangisda daw doon sa Scarborough. Another attempt at trying to challenge the Chinese sovereign control at Scarborough Shoal. The whole of 2023, we saw the failure of the bait and cry, yung paing at angal, no, na strategy, tactics, is now set to resume. Magsisimula na naman po sa 2024, but China will not budge. Hindi naman gagalaw ang China sa kanyang posisyon. Duterte's policy of dialogue and cooperation saw win-win projects and potential of 60-40 o joint oil gas exploration. And another year of bait and try, isang taon na naman ng paing at angal, is, sabi nga ni Einstein, doing the same thing expecting a different result, which Einstein called insanity, kabaliwan. China has stepped up sovereign control of the disputed South China Sea areas, with the Philippines using professional, lethal, non-lethal means consistent with international soft police practice. Water cannons are used all over the world. Let's go to slide number 5. Kita po natin, Taiwan uses it, Vietnam uses it, iba't ibang mga bansa. Police in the United States use water cannon. Hindi po lethal arm weapon ang water cannon. The Philippine Navy wants to challenge the China. It can take a few shattered windshield. Wala naman problema siguro ang kaunting basag na salamin. Ano? Otherwise, go back to the Duterte mode. Otherwise, kung ayaw niyong mabasag ang mga windshield ng mga bangka at barko ng Philippine Coast Guard, bumalik na kayo sa Duterte approach to the problem, which is dialogue, cooperation, at marami pa pong benepisyo ang Pilipinas. The US proxy elements in the Philippine government and media have repeatedly resorted to lies. Yan, kailangan natin expose ito, kaya kailangan natin talakayin ito, such as denying that there is a Philippine-China agreement on resupply of only humanitarian goods to Sierra Madre. Ito po, slide 6. Sinasabi ni Gasmin mismo. Salita ni Gasmin kay Ambassador Ma Keqing at that time, Ambassador ng People's Republic of China, in front of the media. Sabi ni Gasmin, they were concerned about the Philippines coming up with structures, yung pagtatayo ng struktura sa Ayungin Shoal. Additional structures on the Ayungin Shoal. He said, I told her, sinabi niya kay Ambassador Ma Keqing, that the ship that is moving towards Ayungin Shoal is only for provisions of food and water for the soldiers who are there. Anong gusto sabihin nila, Tariela? Sinungaling si Gasmin? Yan po on record. This is not the only newspaper that reported it. Maraming ibang mga diaryong nag-ulat po niyan. This was in 2013. Alam po ninyo, hindi makakalimot ang kasaysayan sa mga totoong mga pangyayari. Pero niloloko nila ang publiko sa kasalukuyan. Paulit-ulit mga kasinungalingan. Anong susunod po? Tariela lied that there is no Scarborough fishing agreement between China and the Philippines. We quote here the words of President Duterte himself and then Foreign Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano. Slide number 7. And then 8 and 8.1. Ano? Ito po, sabi ni Cayetano, with this, the current tentative agreement in place becomes essential until claimants who refuse to yield from their position find a common ground for an accord. In other words, sinasabi ni Cayetano, may tentative agreement para sa panahon na hindi pa magkasundo, may common ground para magkasundo. Yun. So may agreement. We have a tentative fishing agreement. Sino sinungaling ngayon? Cayetano o si Tariela? Will the mainstream media please report this? Now, merong mga diskusyon talaga dito sa agreement na to. Kasi pumapasok po ang ibang mga issues dito. But let's go to slide number 8. Nandiyan na ba? Yan po. No verbal fishing deal between Duterte and Xi, sabi ng ng Malacanang at that time, si 2021, si Harry Roque. Bakit po? Kasi po, pine-pressure sila Duterte at that time with being pro-China daw. At si Harry Roque bilang tagapagsalita sinabi walang agreement. Kasi nga sinasabi ni Carpio, Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Carpio said the supposed verbal agreement of verbal deal between Duterte and Xi has emboldened the Chinese vessels to stay in the disputed West Philippine Sea. So naging defensive po si Harry Roque at sinasabi niya walang agreement para pang depensa laban sa mga akusasyon nila Carpio. And yan ay dahil po doon sa panggulo na arbitration award. Sa totoo lang walang bisa. But this has been a problem. That is why we have to debunk the arbitration. So tuloy natin sa 8.1. So this is the year 2020. Negotiate, ito ay galing sa Vietnam, sa Vietfish ang source, Vietfish magazine. This is a Vietnamese source. Sinasabi po nitong ulat na to ng Vietnamese, mag-negotiate ng international treaty to replace the agreement on fisheries cooperation in the Tonkin Gulf between Vietnam and China. Merong nangyari ng agreement ang Vietnam at ang China sa Tonkin Gulf. At ito ay tutuloy po doon sa sinasabi ni Cayetano na permanent agreement and na pumasok ng COVID-19. In other words, I'm saying here, Vietnam kaya ngang makipagsundo sa China ng fisheries agreement. Tapos dito, kung ano-anong sinasabi laban sa fisheries agreement ng Pilipinas sa China. Tuloy natin. So we have seen another lie of the Tariela Group. Prior, another kasinungalingan. Prior to this agreement lie of Tariela, the before lie of alleged cyanide deliberate destruction by Chinese maritime militia, which the Philippine Coast Guard had to walk back as evidence shows. The Philippines being the top cyanide fishing nation in history. Slide number 9.1. Ito po, from 2003 na report ng World Wildlife Fund. Ganyang katagal na po ito. Wala pa pong kontrobersya diyan sa South China Sea. Hindi pa po issue yan. Ano sabi po ng World Wildlife Fund posted in January 29, 2003? Cyanide fishing began in the 1960s in the Philippines to supply the international aquarium trade. But since the early 1980s, a much bigger business has emerged, supplying reef fish for the restaurants of Hong Kong, Singapore, and increasingly mainland China. So, Pilipinas ang sentro ng cyanide fishing para mag-supply nga nitong mga merkado ng aquarium fish at saka mga live fish na nakikita natin sa aquarium na lumalangoy-langoy tapos iluluto. So, hindi po China ang gumagawa nito. Mga fishermen po natin. And we have been pursuing this issue for many decades now. Hindi na kinokontrol ng Philippine Coast Guard itong mga pangyayaring ito. O hindi makontrol, hindi kaya makontrol. Okay, so we have exposed another lie by Bureau of Fisheries and Aquarium Aquatic Resources known this time. And then this latest, next slide. Kasinungalingan ng mga politiko po natin about the Benham rights violation daw ng Chinese research ship. Ito po ang politiko na si Franz Castro ng Kaliwa ng Party List Act teachers. While Chinese maritime intrusions are often observed in the disputed South China Sea, the presence of Chinese vessels in the eastern part of the Philippines is a clear violation of our sovereignty sa Benham rights. Mabuti naman may mga professional po sa ating Philippine Navy. At sabi niya, yung dalawang barko, hayang DC Liu Xiao at saka yung isa, did not need to ask permission from the Philippine government when they passed through Philippine rights, yung Benham rights. They only passed through our EEZ. There is no violation. At marinig mo itong mga kasinungalingan po ni Franz Castro, kay Larissa Hontiveros, kay Senator Tolentino, and so on. So, ang daming mga kasinungalingan. I have 5 minutes more to go. So, ASEAN's polite, ASEAN, lagi nilang sinasabi, ang mundo sumusuporta sa Pilipinas. Bakit ang ASEAN hindi sumusuporta sa Pilipinas? Ito po, ASEAN's polite silence on the matter is broken by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's comments to Australian media. Quote, decrying, quote, China-phobia among US and Western allies, obliquely alluding to the Philippines among the US non-Western allies. Ano? Yun. So, he lately added in Australia, nandiyan na po yung comment ni attempts to contain China's rise would only aggravate the country and sow discord in the region. Yan po ang boses actually ng ASEAN. Hindi nila tinutukoy ang Pilipinas na nagba-violate po ng centrality ng ASEAN dito sa mga issues na to. Pero may pahiwatig na malinaw po si Anwar Ibrahim. Si Bongbong Marcos naman laging in defensive sa mga interviews. The Philippines acts for its own interests. It is not a policy that has been foisted upon us by any country about the American impositions. No? So maraming nagdududa sa mga pinagsasabi ni Bongbong. Slide 13, sunod-sunod mo na, 13.01, 13.1. Nagmamatapang po si Bongbong Marcos, pero wala naman sa mundong naniniwala. Philippines again in the front line sa tulad ng World War II. I think Kaado will elaborate on that. Susunod is one headline. But anong totoo sa Australia? Ang Australia po nakikipag-areglo sa China at lumalapit sa China dahil po, ayan po, bumisita si Prime Minister Albanese noong November 2022, yung buong taon ng 2023, inaayos nila ang problema at para maibalik po ang mga exports nila sa China tulad ng susunod na slide, Joshua. Australian lobsters and wine to China likely to resume. This is November 22, 2023 as relations warm up. So ang Australia nakikipag-areglo, nagmamatapang ang pipitsuging. I will have to say it, Pilipinas, pipitsugin po tayo. Hindi natin mapakain ng ating mga mahihirap ng murang bigas. Magmamatapang lalalaman sa China na superpower po na kahit ang Estados Unidos ay takot. I think we really have to stop all this charade ng Pilipinas tungkol dito dahil sa utos ng Amerikano. BBM was insulted by Australian journalist Sarah Ferguson about the Marcos plunder. And sabi ni Sarah Ferguson, you can put in the slide, may I ask you why that's funny? At nautal si Bongbong Marcos kasi nga nagpo-posisyon si Bongbong Marcos na matapang. Ini-insulto na lang ng mga foreign people. So it's sleepless in Malacanang na hindi daw makatulog si Bongbong Marcos. Ayon dito sa column ni Iris Gonzalez ng Philippine Star. And the Philippine Embassy in Washington, si Babes Romualdez, hindi din makatulog dahil tinatawagan siya sa madaling araw ni Bongbong Marcos. As the anxiety of China's possible response to the escalation of the transparency strategy and the trade repercussions that may ensue. Iris Gonzalez, slide 14, 14.1, 14.2, and so on. So, para mabigyan ng kumpiyansa si Bongbong, sabi ni Babes Romualdez, ambassador ng Pilipinas sa China, merong 1.7 trillion pesos na i-invest ng Amerika. Examinin natin ang record ng Amerika. Tingnan natin ang next slide. Yung pinangako ni Biden noong 2022 na Build Back Better World, kasama po ang mundo, pantapat po sa Belt and Road Initiative ng China, is dead. Galing sa Forbes Advisor, American Magazine. Walang pera ang Amerika sa lahat ng mga pinapangako niya. Ang susunod na pantapat ng Amerika at India sa China, yung India-Middle East Corridor. Ano po nangyari? The uncertain future of the India-Middle East Middle East-Europe Corridor. Wala pong nangyayari sa lahat ng mga pangako ng Amerikano. Susunod na slide. Anong nandiyan? Ang Japan, aasahan daw, Japan's economy unexpectedly slips into recession, hurt by weak domestic demand. Pabagsak po ang Japanese economy. Anong susunod na slide? Kaya sabi po itong si ating foreign minister, foreign secretary, Philippines preparing for possible economic fallout with China amid sea dispute. Nangangamba na si Secretary Manalo na ang susunod na mangyayari baka tigilan na ang import ng China ng bananas, ang galing sa Davao po si Ginong Peter Q. Lavinia, avocado bang sa durian. Naka 1 bilyong export first time in the history. Baka yan ay mawala na kaagad. Ano? Pineapple and so on and so forth. Yan po ang tinataya po nitong mga adventuristang Tariela and Company sa utos po ng Amerikanong si Raymond Powell. Yung ating ekonomiya. Anong susunod na slide? But anong totoong pakiramdam ni Manalo tungkol sa Amerika? Sabi niyo, but Manalo acknowledged there were at least a small at least a small question mark over support from the Philippines, most important security partner, the United States. Asked about the November election, which will pit incumbent Joe Biden against Republican firebrand Donald Trump, he said it was a topic of frequent debate behind closed doors. Manalo afraid US will abandon the Philippines, sorry sa typographical error, like the way the US abandoned Vietnam, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and so on. Yan po ang alay ng Pilipinas. Ang Amerika na iniiwanan lahat ng mga allies niya. Okay. So sleepless daw, no? It's sleepless in Malacanang, Philippine Embassy in Washington, as anxieties of China's possible response to the escalation to the transparency strategy and trade repercussions may ensue. But Duterte was never sleepless. Si Duterte, hindi naman nagkukulang ng tulog nung panahon niya. There was, kasi nga maayos ang relasyon sa China. There is no reward for being a proxy and vassal state. Ukraine's tragic fate today is a lesson for the would-be Ukraine 2.0, also known as the Philippines. While the Philippines is allying with Quad and AUKUS, it is isolating from ASEAN and center of the region's community. Nothing could be more telling. Slide 15. China 2023 GDP growth forecast revised up to 5.2% according to IMF. In other, China is getting stronger, and slide 15.1 will BBM be Zelensky? Kasi si Zelensky po, well, again, ASEAN po, si Jokowi ng Indonesia said, the big powers should not sharpen rivalries in ASEAN Summit. Pero yun naman ang ginagawa ni Bongbong Marcos sa mga speeches niya. Susunod po, what is happening to Zelensky? Naghahanda na po ng escape route ang Amerikano para kay Zelensky. Dahil malapit na po mag-collapse ang Kiev mismo. Hindi masyadong nauulat po ito, but Asia Times is a international magazine na unang nag-report na inihanda ng escape. Si Bongbong Marcos kaya, 2-3 years down the road, kailangan mag-eskapo rin sa Pilipinas. Okay. Duterte's time is a paradigm of win-win relations with China, as Cayetano explains today. Sabi ni Cayetano, kailangan ibalanse natin yung handling of the West Philippine Sea and the economic issues. Economic cooperation boosted the Philippines when crisis came. China quickly aided the country. Slide 17. Aliwa Dam, Chico River Irrigation, Delia Pantaleon Bridge, Tamuros Binondo Bridge, Davao Bridge, Davao, you have a new bridge being constructed, and so on and so forth. Ang daming proyekto. Anong nabigay ng Amerika the past 2 years dito sa kay Bongbong? Military bases. It's simple for Bongbong Marcos to get back his sleep, makatulog siya ulit, drop the US imperialists and return to the fold of Asia, ASEAN, and China's community. Transparency 2.0 strategy has not seen a single benefit for the real problems of the nation. Hunger and hardship is expressed in frustration over rise, electricity, fuel inflation. Transparency 2.0 addresses none of these pressing matters of the people, but the BBM government and security officials are all focused on an ex-US Air Force colonel beating the drum of Transparency 2.0. Balik natin si Roland Power sa screen, Joshua, if you can. Meanwhile, ito ang ending ko po. The business of profits for the ruling class goes on. Slide 18. Tingnan natin po yung next slide. Sino po yung nasa gitna? Ano po ang event na to? Memorandum of Understanding signing of EEI Corporation and ZL China ito, Machinery Philippines. Present at the MOU signing from left, Chris Zheng, Ye Yuan, ano yung sino yung nasa gitna? Jesus Martin Cacho Araneta, pamangkin po ni Isa Araneta. Brother, kapatid pala, kapatid. President ZL, yan. Siya po ang Assistant President and General Manager of Earth Moving Machinery. Jesus Martin Cacho Araneta, President. ZL Machineries Philippines. Ano? So anyway, so walang tigil ang negosyo ng pamilya ni Liza Araneta with the Chinese. And the big media and politicians, countless scholars, and penny anti-journalists feed on the US of A funds for its information or disinformation. It's funds for its information or disinformation. Slide number 18.1. US Congress proposes 500 million for negative news coverage of China. Yan po ay kumakalat po kanina na papag-usapan namin ng headquarters ng Amerikano sa kanilang propaganda campaign po sa Pilipinas. Nandyan sa Makati, maybe in our next report we will identify kung saang lugar at doon po pumunta lahat ng mga kailangan ng counting dolyares po at kumuha sa mga Amerikano. So my last sentence is pity the Filipino nation. Okay. With that, I'll turn over now to Ani ulit, and we can have the report on the 2 sessions in China from our Davao colleague, Peter Q. Lavinia. Peter first. No.
Thank you, Ka Mentong, for your presentation on the recent developments in our foreign policy. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter Lavinia, the Director of APCO, the Association for Philippines-China Understanding. Let us welcome Mr. Lavinia for his opening remarks.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat, Danny. Ang pag-uusapan ko ho ay tungkol sa nagaganap na tinatawag nilang 2 sessions sa China. Ito ho ang sessions ng China People's Political Consultative Conference at ang National People's Congress. Ano po itong mga ito? Every year ho, nagkakaroon ito ng pagpupulong itong dalawang malalaking body sa China. Ang National People's Congress ay ang kanilang kongreso o parliament. Ang People's Consultative Conference naman ay advisory body. No? Ito ho yung mga naglalatag na mga plano sa China. Ito ho ay pwedeng mahiluntulad natin sa ating policy making body, ang kongreso. No? Pero wala ho tayo nung tinatawag na consultative conference. Sa China kasi, masasabi kong talagang tunay na demokrasya ang gawin nila dahil imagine ninyo 1.4 billion no, na Chinese. Tapos, parang inverted pyramid, kung i-imagine natin, sinasala talaga nila ang mga tao at ang mga ideya. No? Para anong mas maganda sa China. So galing yan sa 1.4 billion people, meron niyang villages, parang barangay sa atin. May mga representative sila hanggang munisipyo, probinsya, region, hanggang dumarating dito sa National Congress nila. 3,000 ho ang membro niyan. At dyan naman sa 3,000, pinipili nila yung kanilang tinatawag na standing committee na more than 100 yan. At ito yung nagpipili na naman na parang 100 hanggang pipili ng presidente. Yung isa na lang. No? Imagine nyo, from 1.4 billion, napipili nila hanggang isa. So salang-sala nila. Sino ang pinakamagaling sa China? Sino ang may mga magagandang ideya? Ito na ho yung nagbi-meeting ngayon. yung tinatawag nilang National People's Congress. At dito, nilalatag nila ang kanilang mga programa. For example, nilabas na nila na ang kanilang growth target for the next year is another 5% GDP growth. No? At kinukontrol nila ang kanilang inflation to only 3%. No? Tapos, mag-create sila ng additional 12 million jobs. So ito yung mga tinatakda nilang targets sa pagpaplano. Pero itong kanilang pagpaplano, halos continuing process ng pag-aaral, ng konsultasyon, hanggang sa nabubuo nila ang kanilang programa. Yan ang kaibahan sa atin. Kasi sa atin, ang ating mga politiko, kung ano lang ang flavor of the month, sinong gustong sumikat, bla bla bla. Pero tingnan nyo ang mga problema ng taong bayan, hindi na-address. Dahil wala tayong continuing process of paghihimay-himay at pag-aaral ng anong mga problema ng bansa, ng ating taong bayan, at ano ang ating dapat gawin. Yan ho ang kaibahan. O kaya itong tinatawag na 2 sessions in China, hindi lang mahalaga sa bansa nila, pati sa buong mundo. Bakit? China ngayon pinakamalaki na sa manufacturing, sa industries, sa technology, no? Sa Pilipinas, siya ang ating number 1 trading partner. O kaya kung ano man ang nangyayari sa China, ano man ang plano nila, merong effect, no? Or mag-i-impact sa atin kung ano man ang mga plano nila. Kaya mahalaga na maintindihan ito ng ating taong bayan na kung ano itong tinatawag na 2 sessions in China. Sa pamamagitan din itong kanilang 2 sessions, daan nila pinipili ang kanilang mga leaders. No? Ito rin, pwede nating compare sa anong nangyayari sa ibang mga tinatawag na demokrasya raw. For example, nakita natin ngayon sa Estados Unidos na nagyayabang sila ang cradle o sila ang sentro ng democracy. Nung makaraang araw lang, nagkaroon ng Super Tuesday primary, tinatawag nila sa US. Pagpipili kung sinong maglalaban-laban sa darating na halalan nila sa November. Pero tingnan nyo naman yung mga kandidato. Halos walang quality. No? Halos magkapareha lang ng mga posisyon at mga ideya. Magkabilang partido lang. Naalala ko tuloy yung sinabi ni Fidel Castro na actually ang Amerika, wala namang two-party system yan. It's a one-party system sa Amerika controlled by the Zionist lobby. Kaya lang, meron dalawang wing. Sabi nila, yung Democratic wing at Republican wing. Pero may pinag-iba ba yung dalawa? Halos wala. No? Kaya makikita natin, yung tinatawag na demokrasya sa Amerika ay pagpipili ng mga sinong magiging leader nila para i-promote ang interest ng iilan. Di ba? I-compare natin ngayon sa China, itong gagawa ng 2 sessions at pagpipili nila kung sino ang mga karapat-dapat na leaders nila na mag-i-implement nitong mga programang ito. Baliktad na sistema, di ba? Pinag-uusapan muna ano ang ating solusyon, saka tayo maghahanap sino ang tamang leader na mag-i-implement nitong solusyon. So iba talaga ang demokrasya sa China. Tinatawag nilang people's democracy, no? Na talagang nasusunod kung ano ang gusto ng mga mamamayan. Kaya hindi nakakapagtaka sa mga survey-survey kahit ginagawa ito ng mga Western countries. Ang taas ng approval rating ng sistema nila at ng mga leaders nila. Ikumpara naman natin for example sa Amerika ngayon, kung titingnan mo ang approval rating ni President Biden, mababa pa sa 30%. No? Sa China, umaabot ng 80+% ang approval rating ng kanilang mga leaders. No? Kaya yung mahalaga na dapat maintindihan din natin ano itong nangyayari sa China sa paglulunsad nitong tinatawag na 2 sessions. sana nga, yan din ang mangyari sa bansa natin na magkaroon talaga ng tunay na representation ang ating mga mamamayan. Dahil dito makikita natin, yan 3,000 na yan, alam nyo ilang percent ang galing sa IPs, mga indigenous peoples? 17%. No? Ilan ang mga manggagawa at mga peasant? Ganun din. Ilan ang mga katulad nating mga middle class professionals? More than 20%. No? So makita mo ang kanilang kongreso talagang representative of the people. No? Kung ikumpara natin yan sa ating kongreso ngayon, sabi nila, majority na yan, contractor. Kung hindi naman contractor, yung congressman, naging contractor na rin. So practically, 99% ng representative natin sa ating kongreso represents the elite. No, kung ikumpara natin sa China, no, ordinary people are in their parliament dito sa kanilang tinatawag na National People's Congress. So sana maintindihan ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino na ang sistema sa China ay hindi pwedeng ikumpara sa sistema sa Western countries na tinatawag na democracy. Na ginaya natin. Kinopya lang natin yung constitution at political system ng Estados Unidos. Sana magkaroon pa tayo ng mga pag-aaral na ano ba talaga ang mas better system sa Pilipinas na pwede nating matawag na representative democracy. Yan po. Maraming salamat, Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Tiulavinia, for enlightening us on China's two sessions, which demonstrate their people's democracy. Thank you for your remarks. Next, I'd like to welcome Ka Ado Paglinawan. He's the Vice President for Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies for Internal Affairs. Let us welcome Ka Ado for his opening remarks.
Yan po ang dahilan kung bakit mabilis ang progreso sa China. Sa China po, ina-identify muna nila ang problema. Saka sila naghahanap ng solusyon. Sa Pilipinas po, naghahanap sila ng solusyon at pagkatapos gumagawa sila ng problema. Yan po ang sumasyon ng presentation ni Mr. Lavinia. The Filipino has a problem for every solution. Ayan. Katulad po ngayon, ang title po ng aking presentation ay simple lamang, naghahayag ng suma kung ano mga nangyari recently. At ang title po nito ay Marcos Takes Philippines to the Brink of War. Maaari pong hindi alam ng karamihan. Ito po ay nagsimula last year. February pa po, sa pagtatayo ng 4 additional sites sa EDCA, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the US. At ngayon, mukhang hindi na makatulog si Presidente Marcos dahil hanggang ngayon ay ang kapalit ng 4 na base ay wala pang dumarating. At sinisingil na niya ang kanyang tiyo, si Babes Romualdez. Kaya pareho na silang hindi makatulog. Yung isa, sleepless in Washington, D.C. Yung isa, sleepless overlooking Pasig River. Ayan. Yan o ang katotohanan. At habang piniprepara tayo sa ayaw natin o sa gusto, para sa sigalot, sa gulo, at sa gera, our government speaks with many voices. Ang ganda po ng timing. Dahil ka-announce lang kahapon ni Danny Long that China will soon unveil its fourth aircraft carrier. Ayan po mga kabansak. 4 na. Ang Amerika, 7 ang major aircraft carrier nila. Kaya nga 7th fleet. No? At bawat isang aircraft carrier ay nagmamanman, nagbabantay sa buong mundo. Na may mga kasama, mga bodyguard ng mga destroyers, frigates, and whatever, submarines. Ito pong nakaraang 10 araw ay dumalaw ang ating Pangulo sa Australia. At siya ay pumirma ng 3 agreements. Una, sa maritime domain and maritime environment. Pangalawa, sa cyber and critical technology. At pangatlo, sa effective competition laws and policies. Yung pong una, sa ngayon sa palasyo, ay naghahangad na i-strengthen ang civil-military cooperation, enhance defense deals, and promote international law and rule-based, no? Markahan nyo, rule-based international order. Kaya ito ay agad-agad na binatikos ng China. At tinawag ng China ang Maritime Agreement na insensitive at destabilizing. Marcos' insensitivity signing a pact with Australia ignored the trade war between China and Australia that is yet to heal. Kaya nga po yung bago nilang Prime Minister ay nagpunta noong November sa Beijing. Ito pong si Albanese. Para iritoke ang economic relationship between China and Australia. Worse, hindi kinonsider ni Marcos na ang Australia, other than the bilateral agreements and military commitments like the one in the Philippines, is also part ng siyam na strategic alliances. Nagsisimula sa 5 eyes, 5 mata. Papuntang AUKUS, papuntang Quad. Lahat ay hindi kasama ang China. Under the terms of AUKUS, for instance, security alliance with the US and the United Kingdom, Australia will receive conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarines that will help its Navy counter Chinese nuclear power vessels in the region. Kaya sa pagsasalita ng Deputy Director ng China's Foreign Ministry na si Mao Ning, sabi niya, the South China Sea is generally stable. Relevant countries' maritime security cooperation should not undermine other countries' interests or disrupt regional peace and stability. So ano ang ginawa ng ating Pangulo sa Canberra? Addressing the Australian Parliament, sinuot niya ang kanyang white Anglo-Saxon na sombrero as he slipped into a controversial part of history. Quote, as in 1942, the Philippines now finds itself on the front line against actions that undermine regional peace, erode regional stability, and threaten regional success. Halos pareho sila ng obserbasyon ni Mao Ning. Pero iba ang interpretasyon. Kaya siya ay agad na pinuna ni Ambassador Rigoberto Tiglao sa kanyang column sa Manila Times na mukhang isang speech na rinaft sa US Embassy dito sa Maynila. O di kaya ay doon sa sikretong opisina nila sa Makati ng US Agency for Global Media Affairs na may budget na kalahating bilyong dolyares. Ang sabi ni Tiglao, that statement is so grossly inaccurate. Hindi po ang Pilipinas ang nasa frontline ng World War II Pacific Theater. Nakalimutan yata ng ating Pangulo na 1942 itong kanyang binabanggit. Eh nagkaroon lamang tayo ng independensya noong 1946. Kundi ang mga Amerikano. Dahil tayo ay isang colony, na nagkokontrol ng ating foreign relations noong panahon na yon. Kaya po tinarget ng mga Hapon dito sa Pilipinas ay hindi ang mga Pilipino kung hindi ang mga base militar ng Amerika. The American leadership even ordered, sabi ni Tiglao, their colony to be abandoned. Natatandaan nyo? Nagsisimula pa lang ang gera, sumakay na si Douglas MacArthur sa isang submarino. Kasama si Quezon. At siyempre, para hindi mawala sa poder si Quezon, sinama niya yung vice president niya, si Osmeña. And of course, kasama dyan si Carlos P. Romulo at yung kanilang stenographer na si Raul Manglapus. Sumakay sila sa isang submarino at nagpunta sila
Recording stopped.
in defending its territorial sovereignty, noting that if Australia chooses confrontation against China with the Philippines, Beijing ay babagsak with future. Alam ho ba ninyo na ang produkto nilang wine, dahil wala silang mapagbuntunan, pero ang balita magsisimula na mag-ship uli sa China. In the midst of all this, ano nangyari? Mukhang walang inaasahan si Bongbong, sleepless na naman, tinawagan ng kanyang CEO. At ang kanyang CEO naman ay nagsabi na the other on her starboard side or right side, ito, shall keep out of the way and shall, if circumstances of the case admit, avoid crossing ahead of the other vessel. So kung titingnan nyo sa video na ito yung starting position, pero sino nauna doon? Yung Philippine ship. So sino ang guilty ng dangerous maneuvers and dangerous actions? Alam nyo, ito isang problema na dinidiscuss ko with 3 former PCG commandants. Na mga PCG, bobo when it comes to piloting their vessels. And it reflects the basic right-of-way mentality of the Filipino. Ano? Sa traffic, ang may right-of-way sa Pilipino. Ano? Kung sino ang mauna sa gitna. Siya ang may right-of-way. O, di pagdating na nauna siya sa gitna, pero ang ginawa tuloy nito, siya na tumigil, hindi lang siya nagpreno, uma-atras pa siya para to give way kasi pakita niya, desidido. Desidido. Buti na lang hindi lumubo. Ayan mga kabansa. Pangatlo, sabi niya, ano sabi niya? This is not the right time for the Philippines to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. Bakit po binabanggit? If it's not the right time, why are you mentioning it? Ha? Hindi pala right time. No. Joshua, meron ka ba nitong tape nitong mga iksi natin na ito? Anong provision ng Mutual Defense Treaty? Kaya nilalakad na ho ni Powell ngayon na ang water cannon ay maging arm attack. Bakit? To invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty, walang armed attack, hindi pwede. So, inabaliktad na nila ang definition ng arm attack. Gusto na nilang i-include ang water cannon at i-include sa kanilang rule-based order. So, yan mga kabansa. Hindi pwede yan eh. Dahil ang water cannon, blockades are non-lethal weapons. Flaring lasers are non-lethal weapons. Acoustic and sonars are non-lethal weapons. Ano ibig sabihin? Lethal. Ano? Non-lethal. Hindi nakakamatay. Siguro kung lunok mo lang lahat yung binugan ng water cannon, siguro impatso ka, patay ka. Besides, hindi ito nangyayari sa metropolitan area in the Philippines or on any territorial seas claimed by China in the Pacific. At kung ito ang totoo, kung siya'y tunay na anak nito, ito ang sabi ng totoong Marcos. Pakinggan natin ang sinabi ng totoong Marcos.
Agency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there. The United States is not necessarily bound to immediately react because the provision of the Mutual Defense Pact is that you will immediately take steps as is necessary to meet the contingency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there.
Ayan mga kabansa. Habang namamatay na tayo rito, nagdidebate pa sila sa Washington DC kung ano ang gagawin. Ano nangyari sa Ukraine? 1 taon silang nagdidebate. Hiningi na Ukraine more than $100 billion. Finally, darating na, pero 60 billion lamang. Dahil yung 30, pupunta yata sa Israel at yung 10, pupunta sa Taiwan. Walang nabanggit tungkol sa pupunta sa 4 sites ng EDCA. Hindi tayo nasama. Ang pang-apat na popa ni Marcos ay ito namang nangyari sa Benham Rice. Ang sabi niya, the presence of Chinese research vessels in the Benham Rice was a clear intrusion into the Philippine Maritime territory. Ay mabuti na lang may mga honest na Philippine Navy professionals. Ano ang sabi? Napansin nyo ba hindi na si Tariela? Hindi na yung pangit ang lumalabas ngayon. Medyo puging na ito. And Commodore Trinidad said, there is no violation made. The passage of the Chinese vessels was still permissible. They have freedom of navigation when it comes to the EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone of Coastal States, so they can pass. Bakit po? Against sa kanilang ikinakalat na chismis. Sa EEZ po, hindi walang karapatan ang coastal state sa ibabaw ng tubig. The ibabaw ng tubig remains to be international waters. And earlier, the Philippine Navy spokesman clarified that the presence of the Chinese maritime militia does not automatically mean illegal action or harassment. Presence is different from illegal action. Alam niyo mga kabansa, marami pang pwedeng pagkwentuhan, pero I will go to the closing of my presentation. Ano ba talaga ang problema natin? Alam nyo, former ambassador to the Philippines, Fu Ying, and very high official now in the foreign affairs ng China, si Fu Ying, sa kanyang libro, Seeing the World, number 2. The first article ng chapter 5 entitled Peace Issues in Asia, ito, Wang Yan Dao, or Scarborough Shoal, what actually happened in 2012. Ito ang kanyang obserbasyon after all the narrations. Pwede pa raw maremedyohan. However, the Philippine government was not of one voice. The Philippine Foreign Secretary soon started to spin the story. He claimed that China had persuaded the U.S. to put pressure on the Philippines to withdraw, and it had now occupied the Scarborough Shoal. Clearly, sabi niya, sumalangit nawa ang kanyang kaluluwa. Del Rosario was trying to create controversy and to challenge the right of the Chinese surveillance ships to remain in the area to watch over Scarborough Shoal. as we later discovered, he was already preparing to bring the matter to international arbitration. The Rosario's key working assumption was that the Philippines had been in rightful possession of Scarborough Shoal, which was now lost to China. In fact, the Philippines has started to fabricate new evidence to support its sovereignty claims over Scarborough Shoal. Ano ang problema? Tayo mismo, from the president down to Tariela, cannot agree. The national defense cannot agree with the foreign affairs. The Philippine Navy does not agree with the Coast Guard. Nanggugulo pa yung Jonathan na hindi naman malaya. The National Security Council. Na abogado pero hindi nagbabasa ng batas. Iba-ibang definition nila ng sovereignty, sovereignty rights. Ibang definition nila ng territory, sa jurisdiction. Ibang definition nila sa territorial land versus territorial sea. At ngayon may bago pang term na binabanggit si Marcos. Maritime territory according to UNCLOS. Tapos gusto pa nilang palitan at gawing arm attack ang water cannon, glaring lasers, acoustics, and sonars. Samantalang simple lamang mga kabansa. Ang hinihingi ng China. Tayo dalawa usap. Wala kengkoy, gulo. Tayo dalawa. Yung usap natin dalawa, batas. Sa'yo, batas sa akin. Negosyo na tayo. The only way we can put our sovereignty rights, our easy, and protrude the claimed sovereignty of China is if China, who is the sovereign and the owner, allows us, welcomes us into its territory through the bilateral negotiation, sa pag-uusap. Hindi ba yan? Nag-uusap si Duterte at si Xi Jinping. Kinabukasan, bukas sa mga fishermen natin ang karagatan. Noong 2018 to 2019, 3 milyong turista na Chino ang dumating sa Pilipinas. Last year, wala pang 300,000. Ano nangyari sa ating kalakal? Sus, Mariosep, overnight. Our biggest export now is 1.3 billion US dollars just on nickel ore. And all China is willing to buy all the fruits that we can produce. Negosyo. Sabi ng statistics, Japan, in terms of amount, is the biggest investor. But in terms of the volume, yung dami ng mga investors, China is number 1. Kaya nung panahon ni Duterte, pumuputok ang Binondo. At ang mga probinsyano nagpupunta sa Divisoria para kumuha ng kalakal at dalhin sa kanilang mga munisipyo. Para lahat may negosyo. Maraming may trabaho. Dumaan ang COVID. Nagahol ba tayo? Hindi. Dumating si Marcos, nagahol tayo. Pati bigas na wala. On, tulay, regalo, 3. Tren, loan. Yun, hanggang doon sa Mindanao. Gusto pang cancelin ni Marcos. So, as the President wants to bring us to the brink of war, tayong mga Pilipino, tayong mga mamamayan, should now be more conscious of what we really want from this government and demand the leadership that we deserve, because we do deserve to live comfortably as Duterte promised, and not die for the Marcos family just because Martin Araneta is in business with most of what we should have for food. Yan mga kabansa, mamili tayo. Kasama ba tayo sa gera kay Marcos? At kung hindi, ano ang ating gagawin? Bahala na kayong maghusga. Salamat.
Thank you, Kado, for enlightening us on the situation and the developments in the Ayungin Shoal and President Marcos's seemingly foreign policy which is going nowhere in sight. Oh. I was assigned today by Mr. Camentong Laurel to discuss briefly the recent comments of former Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, his comments regarding our resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal, specifically his comments at the Diamond Hotel Manila, where the British Embassy organized a forum with BBC News, with Professor Richard Heydarian, with Carpio, and the Akbayan chair. They held a forum on various issues. But what I'd like to highlight here is seemingly the new position of Justice Carpio on our resupply missions on Ayungin Shoal. He said, and this was reported by GMA News, the headline is that Philippines cannot complain to UNCLOS, the United Nations Laws of the Seas, about China's behavior at the Ayungin Shoal when they conduct law enforcement operations such as non-lethal water cannons or blockades. I'd like to revisit my article that I wrote 3 months ago, where Justice Carpio first made his new position on our resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal clear. In an interview with Karen Davila on ANC News last December, Justice Carpio was asked by Karen Davila about the then water cannoning attacks by China against the Philippines in Ayungin Shoal. Carpio said, and I quote, "Resupplying BRP Sierra Madre is a military activity outside of UNCLOS, and UNCLOS has no jurisdiction. The 2016 tribunal, the arbitral award, declared that resupplying a naval ship, BRP Sierra Madre, gray ship, is a military activity. 2016 arbitral award concluded that the dispute between China and the Philippines concerning the BRP Sierra Madre at Ayungin Shoal involves, quote, military activities, and that the tribunal had no authority to assess the situation because it was outside of UNCLOS jurisdiction. for those who want to read the relevant paragraphs of the 2016 arbitration concerning the Philippines, the dispute between the Marine Detachment on Ayungin Shoal, the dispute between China and the Philippines, and the standoff, concerning the standoff, please consult the arbitration award, paragraph 1203 and paragraph 1161 to 1162. 1161 of the arbitration, paragraph 1161 of the arbitration states, quote, in the tribunal's view, this represents, the situation in Ayungin Shoal represents a quintessentially military situation. Why is this relevant? Because the Department of Foreign Affairs, they're saying that the two pillars, their legal basis for the resupply missions at Ayungin Shoal, resupply missions at Ayungin Shoal, is that their two pillars is the UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitration. However, those two documents that they brought up do not support their claim. We have to go back. That you can see it right here. We have to go back to history. We have to revisit history to understand the complete picture. The presence of the BRP Sierra Madre when we grounded that military ship in 1999 as a response to the Chinese building stilts, civilian structures in the nearby Mischief Reef in 1994. What we did was not proportionate grounding the military vessel there, because we escalated the tensions first. Since our claim to Ayungin Shoal, after we ratified UNCLOS, is based exclusive economic zone and not anymore territory. The rights of the coastal state, in this case us, the Philippines, in an exclusive economic zone, our rights to explore for resources, extract hydrocarbons, and fishing rights underneath the water. The surface waters remain international waters. We do not own that. When President Marcos Jr. says that Ayungin Shoal is within our exclusive economic zone, and therefore, according to his logic, we have the legal right to operate there. That is a glaring sin of omission. The country cannot do anything at once in Ayungin Shoal simply because it is in our exclusive economic zone. On top of that, the state of the BRP Sierra Madre is now dilapidated. It's rusting. And if that vessel succumbs to the elements, as Raymond Powell says, sooner rather than later, we will be violating UNCLOS Article 121 on environmental degradation. If that thing sinks into the seas, it will, since it's now naging kalawang na, it's rusting, we will be guilty of polluting the seas. What does the that was Article 125 of UNCLOS states. Governments must take measures to quote to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the marine environment. We will be accused of violating that part of UNCLOS when the Sierra Madre succumbs to the elements and all the rust and the degradation that come with it. Back in October, President Marcos says he ordered, according to National Security Advisor spokes Jonathan Malaya, that President Marcos wants to, quote, civilianize the situation at Ayungin Shoal. That's a faux pas. That is a contradiction in terms, because the presence of the Sierra Madre itself has turned the Ayungin Shoal into a militarized area. And UNCLOS cannot kick in, cannot apply when an area is militarized. It only kicks in when it is in a peaceful situation. How can the president be consistent in his order to civilianize Ayungin when your operations, the resupply mission, are military in nature? However, we have had reached a consensus mutual agreement protocol with China. There are 8 Marines stationed in the Sierra Madre. And for 24 years, fortunately, we've been able to resupply them with food, water, and medicine. If the narrative coming from the mainstream media and the government is true, that China is blocking or harassing our outpost there, then China, if it wanted to, it could starve our Marines there or tow away the ship very easily. But they are very patient with us. However, they're losing their patience. Because we just conducted the 8th bilateral consultative mechanism last January, where the two countries, Philippines and China, came together, had a frank dialogue about their positions, and sought a peaceful resolution on the matter. Which is why in February, according to the armed forces of the Philippines, our resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal was, in their own words, flawless. No harassment, no blocking, no water cannons, no shadowing, because we kept the protocol. There is an agreement. This was reported back in 2013, as shown earlier, that the resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal are merely for food, water, medicine, humanitarian materials. When the mainstream media reports in their headlines, China blocks Philippine resupply missions, they do not make the distinction. Resupply of what? Anong binibitbit nyo dyan? Food, water, medicine, or construction materials? Yung mga bakal, yung mga welding, etc. They're not making the distinction. What was the recommendation of Justice Carpio? Since he told the president that UNCLOS cannot be in our favor in the Ayungin Shoal. What we should have done was put up a civilian structure there. Because if you look at the other islands that we occupy, dun sa Likas, Lawak, and the other islands we occupy, lighthouses, we only have lighthouses in the area. Because those are civilian structures. The Sierra Madre is the only structure that we've put up in the EEZ, which is a military structure. The Americans plan to turn that Sierra Madre into an outpost, which is why, according to the WESCOM, the Western Command, Philippine Western Command, Vice Admiral Carlos, he reported yesterday, and this was not covered in the media as much, that actually the damaged vessel in the recent resupply mission, that was water cannoned, was actually empty. That boat was on a test mission. The resupply mission, the actual resupply mission, was successful, according to Admiral Carlos. But the boat that was damaged was empty. It was on a test mission. Going back to what Voltaire Secretary Gasmin said in 2013 in his conversation with the then Chinese ambassador Ma Keqing, he told us that the Chinese were in fear. They were afraid that we might build another structure there. So what was that boat doing there? It was not a resupply. The headlines before yesterday stated that the boat that was water cannon was a resupply vessel. That is false. The Western Command, Vice Admiral Carlos already came out yesterday and said that that was not a resupply vessel at all. That was a test vessel. What were they doing with that vessel? Was it part of their plan to ground another vessel there, and that would serve as the forward operating base, another symbol of of our another outpost? These are questions that that our officials must answer. Going back to the quote from Carpio, please, Josh, the out there. So, for us, we have consistently stood our ground. Our position has not changed. That the UNCLOS cannot apply at Ayungin Shoal. In a recent Diamond Manila Hotel Forum, former Associate Justice Carpio revised his position and affirmed us saying, resupply missions to Sierra Madre constitutes military activity and thus outside the scope of UNCLOS and compulsory arbitration. We should now shift the activity to civilian activity so we can go back to the arbitral tribunal. The only way that we can shift the activity in Ayungin Shoal so that we have backup from UNCLOS is to really tow away the Sierra Madre. That is the only way. Because forgetting all the legalities of it, President Marcos likes, when he was in the UN General Assembly, gave a speech there, or when he's in Australia, he likes to champion his role in fighting climate change. You cannot fight climate change when you keep maintaining that outpost, which is a rusting, dilapidated outpost, the Sierra Madre in the Ayungin Shoal. You will be violating UNCLOS when it succumbs to the elements and pollutes the seas. That's not fighting climate change, Mr. President. During the Aquino III government, former Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario did not deny the existence of an agreement to remove the Sierra Madre. He told Foreign Affairs Secretary Chinese, his counterpart, Wang Yi, we don't have money to move it. The Chinese then offered to remove the Sierra Madre themselves, which left the Philippine side speechless. That outpost has become an environmental hazard. And I think Justice Carpio probably sees that as well. So who's really violating international law? The US Embassy was quick to issue a statement saying that China's dangerous maneuvers, their actions in Ayungin Shoal, violate international law. But the resupply missions themselves are outside of the jurisdiction of UNCLOS, which forms part of international law. It's not the entirety. PBM and the rest of the government and the media are claiming its resupply missions are done in accordance with UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitration. That's not the case. Should we risk a war or a conflict over a rusting ship, environmental hazard, on a shoal underwater during high tide? If you don't want to tow the ship, that's fine. But the solution is simple. Government says that they are running out of ships for their resupply missions. Solution is simple. Keep the protocol like what we did in February after the bilateral consultative mechanism. Maintain the status quo of only sending humanitarian goods as agreed upon with China, so there will be no more water cannoning incidents. Nobody likes to see that happen anyway. But why is it that Justice Carpio can make this correct observation, but when I or any of our colleagues do the same, we are accused of being pro-China or we're branded a traitor? So if he's spreading misinformation, why doesn't the media or the government condemn him? Because he has now shifted to our position, for which we have been called traitor for presenting. But when he does it, there is no apology, there is no reparation, there is no contrition. We have suffered being branded unfairly, traitor to our country, etc., for saying the same things that he said. His rhetoric was, Justice Carpio's rhetoric was stronger last year. During the first water cannoning incident at Ayungin Shoal on August 2023, President Marcos responded and he said that the situation was a gray area. We have to return that. Before the paradigm shift, before all of that, we had the gray area. What we collectively as a nation have to understand is this. We must recognize the reality of a territorial dispute between China and the Philippines. You will not be treated with a red carpet in the area. So when the president made the statement that the Ayungin Shoal is a gray area, Rappler, Vera Files, him, attacked the president for the statement. Carpio wrote an article for Rappler where he said, Marcos is wrong about gray area in Ayungin Shoal. And he defended the resupply missions before. 7 months later, 6 months later, he has now changed his position. We said at the time, no, the president is right. This is a gray area. You're wrong. Now he has come to the conclusion that what we are doing there is actually outside the authority of UNCLOS. Though we welcome the truth wherever it may come from, I think there has to be some apology for us since we have our allegiance to our country was questioned for saying the exact same thing that he did. This double standard is intolerable and it must end now. So I hope the president and the government and the media covers this more and listens to the new position of the former justice, so that we can finally end this endless cat and mouse game at the Ayungin Shoal. Thank you very much.
So that was a terrific last presentation from our youngest colleague, Mr. Danny Long, who's just entering college now. So these last two frames are very important. Makikita po natin dito si Carpio mismo, bumabaliktad sa mga sinasabi niya nung nakaraan. At sabi niya, yung mga aksyon ng Pilipinas sa Ayungin Shoal on BRP Sierra Madre, hindi sakop ng UNCLOS, which we have been saying all along. So that makes a lie of the entire length of the transparency strategy. So this is a very important frame. I want you to etch in your memory. And the other one, again, uulitin natin yung forward operating base ng Amerikano. Bakit ang China talagang gwadyado po yan? Dahil ito po galing sa War on the Rocks, American Military Magazine. It's time to build combined forward operating base Sierra Madre ng Amerikano. Gusto nilang magtayo ng base militar diyan. Yan ba ay pinapaliwanag ng mainstream malalaking media? Hindi po. Tayo dito po ang nag-uulat po. Ginagamit ng Amerikano, Raymond Powell, can we put him in again? You have to remember these faces and this name. Si Raymond Powell, siya ang nasa likod po ng operations ng lahat na to. Yung tawag po nila, code name for this operation, Myoshu Project. Si Raymond Powell. We have been discussing this Myoshu project all these years. Now we are now 15 minutes or 10 minutes to 12. We want to end at 12 o'clock. We thank Mr. Peter Q. Labinia for presenting to our audience an explanation of the two sessions ng China. Kung anong matututuhan natin doon. The National People's Congress, kasabay po kaya two sessions ang tawag ng CPPCC, Chinese People's Political Consultative Commission. So, kinukonsulta ang taong bayan mismo. And of course, yung presentation ni Kaado, which was very comprehensive. At yun ang dapat pag-ingatan po natin dahil tinutulak Bongbong Marcos ang bansa sa isang gera na parang Ukraine 2.0. At napakita po natin na tuloy naman ang negosyo ng pamilya ng mga Araneta, isang Araneta sa China, samantalang pinangsasabong ang Pilipinas sa China doon sa larangan ng geopolitics. Tayo nagpapasalamat